And especially, Father, we ask for the comfort for the family of Harvey Beamler, whom we will all miss. We ask for a portion of your wisdom as we consider and make decisions that affect the citizens we represent. In Jesus' name, amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we have a busy meeting this evening. Talk about we have a couple of certificates of appreciation to give out tonight. Is Nancy Catlett here? How about Deborah Scott? Deborah, would you join me at the podium, please? Sorry, I didn't see you back there amongst the crowd. Deborah Scott has been serving on the Architectural Review Board for us since January of 2005 to December of 2010. And we just wanted to thank her publicly for her involvement in the city, for helping us as a city, as well as taking her personal time in which to do that.
Okay. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
We appreciate that. Okay, we have a special presentation tonight, and what I want to do here is, this is going to be about the aquaculture industry that is proposed, and let me set some goals for the evening, if I could. City Council's been made aware of the application by the Oyster Company of Virginia to the Virginia Marine Resources Commission to lease oyster grounds around Bennett's Creek in the Beach Road area. We've been made aware of some concerns by citizens of Poquoson. I will tell you that we have no jurisdiction in this matter as a city council, but that doesn't mean that we're not concerned, nor does it mean that we are in any way for or against this issue. What we have asked is, we're quite frankly in the dark a little bit as far as council. So we've asked for a presentation tonight from VMRC and Mr. Ben Stagg to brief the City Council on the application and really about the aquaculture, how this is done, so that we can get some information as a council. Then, first and foremost, the people, what we don't want to do is get in here and have people pro and con addressing council who won't make a decision on this. What we instead want to do is make sure that we provide a venue for everybody to get their questions answered and the information out firsthand, so you get to hear it directly here tonight. So what we're going to do is, after Ben's presentation, we're going to let everybody that's concerned about that particular issue go down to the meeting room down here just down the hall, and Debbie Vest from the City of Poquoson is going to facilitate that discussion and make sure that it's an open discussion and that we can get all the questions and answers here. We appreciate the neighbors here that are concerned. We appreciate the representatives of the Oyster Company of Virginia who are here to address any concerns, but mostly Mr. Ben Stagg, we appreciate you coming and letting council hear what's going on with this item. Okay?
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming.
I'm gonna hand this out for y'all. This is a copy for you, Keith.
Thanks.
First, a little bit about me. My name is Ben Stagg. I work for the Marine Resources Commission. I've been there since 1983. I'm one of the dinosaurs still there from a different era. I manage the oyster leasing program for the Engineering Surveying Department, which is a department under the Habitat Management Division. I also do another thing for the agency. I do environmental permitting for the Habitat Management Division, but not for the Poquoson area, for some other localities. I have been managing the leasing program for a number of years. I started in the leasing program, went over to environmental permitting, came back to the leasing program. So tonight, I understand why I'm here. We did receive 2 applications for oyster ground lease in the Poquoson area, one offshore Beach Road and the other in Lloyd's Bay or Floyd's Bay, depending on what you call it. We've always called it both at the agency. We have maps that show it both ways. I think the main application of concern of most of the citizens is the one closest to Beach Road. My purpose is really to discuss generally how the leasing system works and a little bit about aquaculture in general, how the agency handles that. Like most government agencies, we've got a myriad of regulations related to this topic. And the handout I gave you refers to some of those, but not all of them that relate to this. But I'm going to try to run through some of those, and I'm going to kind of use this as a template. This is on our website, this sheet. If you go to our Marine Resources website, there is a link directly to this. It's called Shellfish Aquaculture, and it'll take you to this page, which just gives some general information and where to find a number of the regulations on our website. It's a hot link right to the regulation. I have brought copies of those tonight if we need to refer to them. I will say that Virginia in general, through the Department of Agriculture and Marine Resources Commission as well, it is in favor of shellfish aquaculture. Whether it's on-bottom traditional that's been done in Virginia since the first settlers came over, or what's more modernly called, what people call aquaculture now, which is often in cages or floats. That seems to be the preferred method at the moment. I'll discuss a little bit about that. It is a fairly new industry in Virginia as far as the aquaculture cage and floats, although they have been tried in Virginia for about 20 years now in different ways. For the commission, basically how we permit and license shellfish growing in Virginia is kind of predicated on what is it you really want to do. Do you want to grow shellfish just for consumption personally, or do you want to grow them to sell them? And then how do you want to do it based on those two criteria? If you want to grow oysters not for sale, you have a couple options in Virginia. If you live on the water and you own 205 linear feet along mean low water, then you qualify for a riparian oyster lease from the state, as that's one of the riparian rights you have by the Code of Virginia. You do have to have it surveyed through our department. You have to make an application first through our department, and you have to have it surveyed. It can be no larger than a half an acre, with some variances in the law related to Northampton County on the eastern shore. But generally speaking, almost all riparians are a half acre or less. They could be located anywhere along your shorefront, depending on how much frontage you own. They could not go more than halfway across the creek, obviously, because the person on the other side would have riparian rights as well. So that would be one option if you're actually a landowner along the water. The other option for landowners along the water, if they don't want to get a riparian or they don't have enough frontage, is that they can apply for what we call an oyster gardening permit from the agency. And that's a fairly abbreviated 2-page application that would allow you to grow oysters in what's people commonly call tailor floats. They're the floats you see at people's piers, typically made out of PVC pipe with a mesh material to hold the oysters. And they float basically on the surface with the mesh suspended under the water. And you can tether those to your pier. With that permit, you can have up to 160 square feet of oyster floats at your pier. That's the outline of the actual float. You can have multiple floats up to 160 square feet. That's the maximum you can have under that permit. And that's really just for personal consumption. If you want to have 160 square feet or less and sell them from your dock, then you need a different permit, which is just a regular joint permit application, which is where my environmental engineer job comes in. For any encroachment over state-owned subaqueous land, typically you need a permit except for things that are exempt. Private piers are typically exempt. The aquaculture pier is abbreviated permit, which is exempt from the JPA. But almost anything else, you have to go through the joint permit application process, and it requires a permit. So if you wanted to do floats even at your pier for commercial purposes to sell them, you would need to fill out this joint permit application. Same applies for people who just want to put floats out in the river, who may not even live along the river. They just want to do it out in the bay. They can get the same type of joint permit application and permit. It goes through a public interest review. It is advertised in the paper, and people can object if they want to, but they can be permitted that way. Now, as far as on-bottom type activity, again, any activity that you want to do commercially, we're back to needing some kind of permit or license from the state. Now, you can also lease oyster ground, which is the subject of the main reason I'm here. We have received a regular oyster lease application, 2 of them in Poquoson, to lease the bottom to grow shellfish. And basically, if you get a lease, it gives you the exclusive right to that bottom to grow shellfish. That's all it grants you. It doesn't exclude other uses over the water. You can still boat over it. You can fish over it. You can crab over it. Even crab pots can be set on it. But the person who gets the lease has the exclusive right to the shellfish that are on it, whether they're there naturally or whether they put them there after they lease them. Same for clams. Basically, oyster leases and clam leases are basically interchangeable. It's the same type of lease in the code. Now, traditionally, we've leased oyster ground in Virginia since before the 1900s, and we currently lease about 96,000 acres in Virginia in the tidal waters of oyster ground. It's always traditionally been on bottom. People just either planted shell or got seed somewhere and planted those, and the oysters kind of reproduced on their own and reattached to existing shell, and they were either harvested by tongs or dredges or by hand if it's shallow enough. With the advent of aquaculture in cages, we realized that we needed some mechanism to control that, because typically on-bottom leases didn't normally conflict with other uses. Most people, even if they planted oysters on subaqueous land, they didn't plant them at such a height that they really interfered with other uses like navigation and other uses of the water. They were pretty much way under the water. They were unseen, except when the guy was out there working them, you might see a workboat out there. But it's pretty much been proven that if we can grow oysters in cages and actually elevate them slightly off the bottom, either all the way at the surface in floats or in cages off the bottom, that they will grow faster, they seem to survive better, and they're a lot easier to manage because you have them in a container where you know where they are. They're not subject to being washed away by tide. They're a little harder to steal because you have to actually pull the cage up out of the water. So that's kind of where our oyster aquaculture started. And like I said, it's been done for about 20 years. Well, people started doing it just with all kinds of different cages. They were experimenting with them. We've kind of come down to a standard design now. It's a small cage. Typically, the whole cage itself is 12 inches or less. It actually has feet on the bottom that kind of sit on the bottom and may sink into the subsurface some. But the plan is to try to keep the actual cage structure itself up above the bottom substrate to some degree. If you get a regular oyster ground lease in Virginia, by right, or by regulation rather, you can put cages on the lease, these 12-inch cages. And the regulation specifically says you can put cages on a lease up to 12 inches high with no additional permit other than having the lease. So that would be the case in these current ones we're looking at if the applicant, which he's indicated he does want to do cage aquaculture, if he gets the lease, he could do cages on it. Now, there is a regulation related to that, and it does say a number of caveats that we control, that VMRC. The cages cannot constitute a hazard to navigation, which is, of course, somewhat subjective thing that we have to look at on a case-by-case basis. They cannot be placed on submerged aquatic vegetation, or SAV, and we typically, by policy, don't lease on-bottom leases where there is SAV. That's a relatively recent policy of the agency, and we do have leases that have SAV. We have leases that have been renewed for years. They were originally leased back in the 30s and 40s, and they've been renewed by family members over the years, and they have SAV going on. And you can grow oysters on them. However, we still have a regulation that says you can't put cages on them. And we certainly discourage people as much as possible from dredging in SAV. And there actually is some language in the code related to that. But we would not lease areas of SAV. The application we're looking at least the one along Beach Road, well, both of them, we know have some SAV in the area that was applied for. And we will probably exclude that when we actually survey it. So we wouldn't even lease that to start with, which will shrink this application down considerably that they're asking for. Historically, some people have asked to lease larger areas than they needed as a buffer. And in some instances, we've allowed that. In this instance, I think the applicant has asked something similar. But the area that we're talking about does have SAV, and it's also a shallow sandbar, and it's unlikely that we would lease that area even as a buffer, because we would not lease it to anyone. So there really is no need for a buffer. Some leaseholders do want a buffer from an adjacent lease, just so it gives them an area where they can put their cages in the center and feel like they can keep a better eye on them, so the guy next door doesn't creep across the line and take their oysters. That kind of covers the general way we lease ground and the permits. Now, if you have a lease and you want to put greater than 12 inches of cages, which some applicants now want to do, they actually stack these cages. They are stackable with the feet. They'll stack on top of each other. That requires a whole different permit through our fisheries division. Like I said, we're the government. We don't make anything real simple. And that also requires some pretty extensive information from the applicant. There is a regulation that covers that. That can be done even if you don't have a lease. You could just apply for cages on the bottom, and you'd be back into filing a joint permit application through our habitat division. And we would process that through a public interest review. Like I said, you can do the greater than 12 on a lease through the fisheries permit. You could do any size cage on unleased bottom through the joint permit application. We don't have very many of those. Most people like to get the lease and then do the cage aquaculture on the lease, because they can do the 12-inch by right, provided they meet the criteria in the regulation. And then they have the option to go for the more extensive permit to go more than 12 inches. The current application is only for the lease and the 12-inch. The applicant, should he get the lease, certainly would have the option to then pursue that additional permit from our fisheries, but he would have to apply completely separate from what's being considered now, and that would go through a whole different process. Pretty stringent criteria on notification about that before fisheries would issue one of those. In addition, there's some additional regulations, which I'm not really going to go into too much, but if you go to our website, you can see them. There's a number of things that a person must get commercially if they're going to grow shellfish and sell them, related to licenses from our commission, just like fishermen have to get a license, the watermen have to get a license. There's some product owner license required for shellfish. And the health department can get involved if you're growing shellfish in areas where the waters are condemned for direct harvest of shellfish. We do lease in areas that are currently closed to direct harvest. You can grow oysters anywhere that they'll grow in Virginia, and you can lease in polluted waters. They change over time as the health department tests the water. They can be relayed from a polluted area to a clean area under a health department permit, purge themselves for 15 days, and then they can be harvested for direct market if they come from a clean area. So some people do that too. And some of the cage people are doing that. They're growing oysters in cages in polluted areas. They have another piece of ground in a clean area. Sometimes they'll grow faster in the area where it's polluted, and then they can move them to the clean area and purge them when they get larger and sell them to the market. So generally, that's kind of the process. I went through it pretty fast. I'd be happy to answer any questions. See city council has them, specifically about the law or even about the specific application that we're reviewing.
Is there a regulation as to the, I know 12 inches, I take it you're referring to the depth of the cage.
Right.
How about the actual size of the cage?
We don't really have a regulation on the size, but typically nobody makes them but so big because you got to lift these things out of the water. A lot of the watermen just use a hoist-type system with a hydraulic to pull them up. And it's becoming somewhat standardized, these cages. You know, there's a couple of people that make them now, and they're pretty much the similar sizes. They're typically usually about the size of a Taylor float, which is often, 2x4 or 3x4 that you see them at people's docks. And like I said, they're 12 inches, but the cage itself is not 12 inches. It's got some feet on the bottom. It's about 8 inches of depth.
Is there any regulation concerning how much water has to be above the cage, particularly at low tide?
There is not specific in the regulation a minimum clearance, but there is in the regulation that they cannot constitute a hazard to navigation. So I think I know where you're going. They could be in shallow water where they are exposed every day at low tide. That could happen. The question would be, if that's happening, is that a hazard to navigation? And certainly we consider all the uses of the water when they're applying. And in this instance, I've gotten a lot of objections about them being in really shallow water because it's used for other purposes.
Yeah.
Swimming, jet skiing, navigation, sailing. And we have to look at that. But we really are currently still doing it on a case-by-case basis. The regulation gives us the authority to look at them and say yes or no. But it's a case-by-case. If you get a lease, I forgot one thing. Let me finish that, and then I'll take a question. If you get a lease, you are supposed to maintain it, mark it in some manner so that you know where it is, which makes sense. There is a regulation related to the marking of it, too. And it basically says you certainly need to mark the corners. And leases can be any shape. They're not necessarily just rectangles or squares. We've got leases that are all different shapes and sizes because people lease them wherever they think the best bottom is, and we work with them on that. So anywhere there's an actual bend in the corner, like on your upland property, they should have a stake. They can also set intermediate stakes in between that, but they're not supposed to be any closer than 150 feet. That's the closest, that's the most intense staking you could do. Most watermen don't stake them anywhere near every 150 feet because PVC pipe costs money, and they stake it enough so they know where the ground is, and probably not, sometimes not enough to know where the ground is. But now if you want to do cages, we will allow you through the regulation to mark areas inside of your lease, not just the boundary, but if you've got a 20-acre lease and you want to do 5 acres of intense aquaculture somewhere inside the lease with cages, you can mark the area where the cages are with some additional stakes. You're supposed to submit to me, the chief engineer, a marking plan if you want to do that. And I look at them on a case-by-case basis to approve them. What you can't do with cages is put floats on them, just like crab pot floats. That would require a permit. Now, you could long line them with a stake. You could put some stakes around the corner and an intermediate stake. If I approve the plan and have a long line attached to those stakes at the end, that you could pull the line up to find your cages as you want to work them. And I understand, that's a concern of people too, that there's a long line there, but that's not a lot different than the nets you see out. You just have to be aware when you're in the water what's out there to some degree. But that is allowed, some additional marking inside of a lease. But what you can't do is stick them up like a picket fence. We went through this on the Eastern Shore when people started doing aquaculture. And there were some areas over there where they literally tried to stake them so close together that you couldn't get a boat into where the cages were to keep people out. They were really trying to just fence people out so they wouldn't mess with them. And we said, you can't do that. The public has the right still to access this water. The only right you're getting is the right to grow shellfish. And if they're cages, you can put cages and you can mark them to some degree so you can find them, but the water body itself is still open to public use.
Yeah, a couple of questions and a comment. Okay, the comment is that it's my understanding that all the area that we're talking about tonight is technically outside the city of Poquoson. Okay, so that we have no venue there technically as a city.
Well, I don't know. I'd have to look to see where your boundary lines
Okay, well,
go for the
well,
city.
that's my
But
understanding.
it's state-owned bottom.
Yeah, okay.
So,
Well, my understanding is the area is technically outside the city of Poquoson. Okay. The other thing is when you talk about 12 inches, okay, are you talking about 12 inches from the bottom, or the cage itself is 12 inches and then there's feet under that?
the cage cannot extend more than 12 inches. When the cage is in place, it can't be higher than 12 inches off the bottom. Now, if the feet sink in, I mean, most of the cages are made so that they will not be more than 12 inches off the bottom, even if they sit on hard bottom.
Okay, and then the last part of my question is, if these cages are in an area where it makes dry on real low tides, okay, so that the cages are sitting there and you can see them, okay, what constitutes a hazard to navigation when the tide's up and they're just barely covered with water?
Well, and that's where, you know, it gets tricky, because that is a judgment call, and we have, at the agency, have to kind of do that on a case-by-case basis. Now, I will say that it's fairly rare that we see these cages in areas that ebb out like that, because, one, in the summertime, they don't want the oysters exposed at every low tide to the sun, because it will bake them to some degree. And in the winter, they don't want them exposed at every low tide because they'll freeze. Just like they freeze in the edge of the marsh at low tides in severe winter conditions, they'll freeze and kill them. And when you stack these things in a metal cage on top of each other in the summer, you know, they get hotter than they grow in the marsh naturally, where they're just kind of single oysters, and they're somewhat shaded by marsh grasses. So I can't say there aren't some cage aquacultures where they might occasionally ebb out to some degree, but typically we're not seeing people want to put them in that type of condition. And I think that is the kind of condition we have at Beach Road. For a good ways offshore, there is a sandbar. I mean, I'm familiar with it. I've worked out there since 1983 surveying ground out there. You know, that's probably, I don't think that's what the applicant wants, from what I understand. They want an area there that is still relatively shallow, but is considerably offshore, past that sandbar area. There's kind of a sandbar, then there's an area where there's some SAV that grows because it's slightly deeper and the bottom's slightly different, and then it drops off a little more before you actually get out to the channel, which the channel's out, you know, where you come out of Bennett's Creek. It's my understanding that's the area that they're really interested in, and we're still evaluating whether that's an appropriate spot even there. I think we've concluded that we will not lease the SAV area, and it's highly unlikely that we would lease that sandbar area.
I've had lots of phone calls and concerns about that particular area.
I've had lots of letters.
Go ahead, Frank. What is your time frame for the approval process?
Well, that's a nice thing about the state. We don't really have anything in the law that says we have to act at any particular time, like some other agencies do, like the Army Corps and DEQ. Best case scenario on this particular application would be that it would be heard at the May commission meeting. Commission meets fourth Tuesday of every month, just like y'all meet. They don't meet once a month, to consider cases that are protested or that staff can't support, or both. We plan to survey the ground yet. We haven't even surveyed it. And the way it works with us is when we get oyster ground lease, and I should have explained that, but the code requires us to advertise it, which is one of the reasons I got the letters. It's advertised once a week for 4 weeks in a local paper, posted in 3 places of local prominence, including at the courthouse is one place, and the MPO's Marine Police Office is posted in 2 other places. And we have to wait. There's a waiting period in the code from the time we do that till we can survey it. We're past that period now. Then we typically survey it, and we have to wait a minimum of 30 days after we survey it, even if we haven't gotten any protest up to that point, which is part of the public interest review, because maybe you didn't see it in the paper, but maybe you live there and you see the stakes when we stick them, and then my phone rings. And that's an opportunity for people to have at least 30 days. And I mean, that's the very quickest we could do it. It's 30 days from the day we survey it to the day we assign it. This is if nobody objects. That's the way the code's written. So it's a 90-day plus process to get a piece of oyster ground. If everything goes really smoothly, you know, there's no protest, we get it, we advertise it right away, we survey it on the 60th day, we're ready to assign it on the 90th day. So we've met the advertising requirement for this one. We haven't surveyed it. The issue with this one is because it's protested, I plan on surveying something that at least we think is possibly leasable before I take it to the commission, because I don't want to take it to the commission as currently applied for on just a piece of paper and say, here's what they applied for, it's 80 acres. Staff can't support part of it. We might could support part of it. But there's a whole lot of people here at this hearing. When we hear it, they're opposed. What I'd like to do is go to the commission with it surveyed, again, to give the people who have objected, and maybe some people who still don't know about it, the chance to see what we're proposing out in the water itself. That way the commission, when they make a decision, the problem if we don't do that is that it goes to the commission and the commission says, well, you know, we can't support the 80 acres, but we can support 30 acres. And I go out there and survey what the commission directed me to survey, and then I get a call. The person says, hey, what are these stakes out here? I said, well, it's a piece of oyster ground. Well, I got an objection. I said, well, did you see the ad in the paper? No. Did you know the commission heard it? No. I'm afraid I'm going to be back before the commission hearing it a second time because now we've surveyed it and somebody didn't see it. So my plan is to take my surveyor, who's here tonight, Rob Butler. I'll be with him when we survey this one, I guarantee you. We're going to survey some kind of an alignment out there, unless the applicant drops the whole thing, and take that to the commission with some kind of staff recommendation, which I still can't tell you what that is yet. I mean, we're still in the process of evaluating it.
Okay. And you said because of the SADs that the 80 acres is probably out of the question.
Yes, and I've relayed that to the applicant. I think the applicant understands that, and I think is in agreement with it, at least to some degree.
What is the figure then? Do you know offhand?
Well, based on, I think, the conversations we've had at the moment for the one lease off of Beach Road, it will be cut at least in half. I think maybe a little more than that. It's hard to tell until we actually get out there. Right now, we're basing it on aerophotography and some information we have from VIMS to tell us where the SAV is. You can actually see some of it in the aerophotography. But VIMS does their own flying and delineates it to a really good degree. And the most current data we have at the agency is 2008, but they have information through 2010. And I have contacted them and am in consultation with them about the area that they believe is appropriate, because they are our advisors scientifically, specifically about SAV. So we rely on them. But it would be much smaller than what's currently applied for. The Lloyds Bay application, which I've gotten some protests, some of them are kind of mingled in. The letter objects to both, but it really appears they're objecting to the Beach Road one. But they listed both of them. I've gotten a few letters that actually specifically say they object to the one in Lloyds Bay as well.
How big is Lloyds Bay? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
How big is Lloyds Bay request?
Remember, Rob? 40, 50 acres. There's some SAV in that too that we will probably exclude. But a big chunk of that area was leased before. The area on Beach Road, specifically where this application, I don't think has ever been leased. There's some leases all around it. Lloyds Bay almost completely was leased from shore to shore, historically. There have been some leases let go in there over the years now, and there is an area now that is available, but.
Thank you.
I had a couple of questions. You mentioned that the fisheries division permit was required if the cages were to be stacked. Do you know if this applicant has applied for that?
I do not believe they have at this, well, I know they hadn't as of last week, because I
Okay.
checked with fisheries. They would have that option only once they got the lease
Oh, okay.
to apply for it then. Or if they just abandon the application completely, they could apply through the joint permit application for cages of any height
Okay.
that would be handled in a different venue.
And then my other question was, does VIMS regulate in any way the harvesting methods?
You mean our agency, or you said VIMS?
I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right.
You mean us?
Yes, sorry.
Well, yeah, I mean, we have licenses and we do have some regulations, but they really are more geared to gear types of how you harvest oysters, like tongs or dredges. And I guess your question is really more about cages, and do we have regulations about how they maintain the cages?
Well, about pressure washing and
I
that
figured
sort of
that's-
stuff,
I
yes.
thought that's where you were heading.
Yes.
We don't really have exact regulations related to that, and I know that's one thing that's been cited about this application, is that, you know, they may be power washing the cages, and that might have a degradation of water quality. Typically, people who do cage aquaculture don't power wash the cages that often. It's not like it's an everyday thing or even a once-a-week thing. In the summer, if they're fouling, they may need some attention with either brushing them off or possibly power washing them off. Lots of times in the winter, it's minimal. You know, the fouling's not anywhere as bad in the colder temperatures. My personal opinion is, you know, when they power wash one, there's probably some temporary water quality impacts when that's happening, because they're washing this stuff off into the water. It is a naturally growing thing that's in the water already, and it's coming off the cages naturally during, you know, tide events and everything else. You know, but most of that, I think, most of the scientists feel that oysters that filter, which is what oysters do, you know, more of those out there is better, because they do improve the water quality, and the minimal amount of power washing and that minimal temporary suspension of sediments, usually, you know, they dissipate within, you know, one tide cycle. That stuff settle back on the bottom. So.
Okay. So it's nothing worse than maybe a big rain coming downstream? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I equate it exactly to that, but yeah, you're right. I mean, a storm event that just causes turbidity in the water does a lot of the same things. You know, wave action.
Is there any state rules about liability, like if for some reason a cage comes up and ends up damaging your dock or your deck or your porch, or does the state have anything to do with that, or is that strictly civil stuff?
It's typically civil.
How did they arrive at the number of 250 per acre? Is that including the ones that you can stack, or is that just a
You mean
single?
amount of cages?
Yes.
I can't answer. You're talking about the applicant.
Well, I thought maybe 250 was some regulation y'all had. It couldn't be any more than that.
The only regulation we have is 160 square feet for the oyster aquaculture floats. You could put, if you do the math, if you have a lease, you know, and you have X number of square feet, and you figure out what size your cage is, I mean, in theory,
Right.
you could put cages end to end, side to side, you know, over the whole area. And you could. I don't think anyone's ever done it, and I don't think anyone ever would, because you can't work them that way.
Right.
You've got to have alleys between them, you've got to have a way to get to them, to pull them up. Whether you're going to power wash them or not, you got to be able to get to them to actually pull them up and harvest the oysters.
Right.
There were some numbers bounced around when Mr. Garrett was in the press recently, Greg Garrett, of how many cages he had a 9-acre lease, and how many thousands of cages he could put on his lease. His math was wrong, actually, what he said, but because I calculated it later. But I mean, yeah, you could put lots of cages, you know, even on an acre lease.
So the 250 was the applicant's number.
Apparently, because I'm not really
Okay.
sure where that came from.
Other questions?
But 250 cages on even 40 acres would be nothing, I mean, square footage wise.
Right.
Well, Ben, thank you so much for coming. I think I've learned more about cage oyster business than I ever knew or contemplated knowing. What I will tell you is that I think there's a lot of places where folks agree. And what I want to do now is, like I said, y'all can get the specific questions and answers of the people that are concerned. They'll get that information firsthand. instead of, by the rumor mill, which can lead to bad information. So we're going to excuse everybody that's associated with that wants to talk about the caged oyster business to the room just down the hall right by the library. We've got it all set up so y'all can have a good conversation. I'm sure the applicant who's here will answer any questions that he can. Ben will continue to answer any questions that he can.
Staying too, so I'll be there too.
Okay. And he's not going out the other door.
Escort him, Chief.
But we appreciate you coming and thank you for the education. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. We'll give everybody a couple minutes so they can get.
Very good.
And I had an almost 2-hour conversation with him on the phone.
That's very good.
Thank you.
I knew nothing. Yeah.
Look at him.
Gonna be a while.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're sending sympathy cards, that's okay.
Later.
I have it easy now. I'm taking everybody with me.
Right.
For a long time.
Everybody wants to hear about the oysters, but we're going to do the budget,
Yeah, can you come to every meeting?
We're going to be done long before you are, Ben. No question.
Thank you, Ben, that was nice, that was very informative.
We can see where they're.
Look at them go. God loves it. Oh, there he is.
Okay, let's see if we can continue on with the meeting. Basically, the next item on the agenda is an audience for visitors. I would remind everybody that there's also a public hearing on the budget, so if you want to talk to us about the budget, you could probably defer until we have that particular public hearing. And I'll open the podium to anybody who wants to speak about any subject except for oysters or the budget. Okay, seeing none. Oh. Yes, ma'am. Okay. All right, so we'll close the audience for visitors, and council will move on to approval of the minutes. If I could get some motions, please.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the minutes for the special session of April 7th, 2011.
Second?
Okay, motion made and seconded. Judy, would you please?
Councilman Krieger.
Aye.
Councilwoman Crawford.
Aye.
Councilman Green.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Freeman.
Aye.
Councilman Southall.
Aye.
Councilman Bernal.
Abstain.
And Mayor Hunt.
Aye.
Mr. Mayor, the motion carried by a vote of 5-0 with one abstention.
Okay.
6-0, excuse me.
And Mr. Mayor, making a motion that we approve the minutes of the regular session of April 11th, 2011.
Second.
Okay, Judy, please.
Councilman Southall.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Freeman.
Aye.
Councilman Bernal.
Abstain.
Councilman Green.
Aye.
Councilman Krieger.
Aye.
Councilwoman Crawford.
Aye.
And Mayor Hunt.
Aye.
Mr. Mayor, the motion carried by a vote of 6-0 with one abstention.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the minutes of the work session on April the 11th, 2011.
Second?
Okay, Judy, please.
Councilman Green.
Aye.
Councilman Bernal.
Abstain.
Councilman Krieger.
Aye.
Councilman Southall.
Aye.
Councilwoman Crawford.
Aye.
And Vice Mayor Freeman.
Aye.
Mayor Hunt.
Aye.
Mr. Mayor, the motion carried by a vote of 6-0 with one abstention.
Okay, and finally, the special session of April 18th.
Make a motion, Mr. Mayor, we approve the special session of April 18th, 2011.
Second.
Okay, Judy, please.
Councilwoman Crawford.
Aye.
Councilman Krieger.
Aye.
Councilman Southall.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Freeman.
Aye.
Councilman Bernal.
Abstain.
Councilman Green.
Aye.
And Mayor Hunt.
Aye.
Mr. Mayor, the motion carried by a vote of 6-0 with one abstention.
Okay, thank you, Judy. Dr. Bernal, and really a reminder for all council, when you abstain, you need to state the reason for your abstention. In particular, yours is that you
was not a member of
you were not
council
a
at the
member of
time of those
council at
meetings,
that time. Very good. That way it gets in the record. I really appreciate that. All right, next item on the agenda is the public hearing, and we'll start with a quick presentation on the proposed fiscal year 2011-2012 annual financial plan. as well as, I'm assuming you're going to do this at the same time, the proposed levies.
You do the presentation the same, but then you do the hearings one after the other.
Okay,
Just one big.
one presentation. All right, thank you.
Tonight, I'd like to give a brief synopsis of the city manager's proposed annual financial plan for fiscal year 2012. As the budget process began, the city was faced with an increase in debt service, declining state revenues, increase in operational costs, and a lack of significant growth in local revenues. Along with these challenges, there were three other significant issues the city was faced with. The first issue was a real property reassessment. The city had a significant decrease in real property values, and this had a major impact on the budget. I'll discuss later the details of the reassessment. The second significant issue affecting this budget is the yet unknown effects of the current unrest in the Middle East and the Japanese earthquake on energy prices in the coming years. Of equal concern is the impact on higher gas prices on the number and type of new automobile sales and valuation and retention of used vehicles. The effect of this is still unknown, but the last time gas prices reached $4, the city saw a budget impact of approximately $302,000. Therefore, the city manager's recommended budget has asked City Council to set aside $302,000 of the general fund balance to mitigate the potential impact. The final issue affecting the 12 budget concerns school funding. The school superintendent estimates that the action of the General Assembly will negatively impact the upcoming school division's budget by more than $700,000. When combined with losses in federal revenue and non-discretionary cost increases, the school division has had to close a budget gap of over $1 million to balance the next year's budget, and the school division did this without additional funding from the city. The school's budget did request an increase in local funding of approximately $137,000 to provide a modest compensation adjustment to school employees. The proposed budget fully funds the superintendent's budget. As mentioned previously, the tax base declined in the city. This decrease was 12.65%. In the history of the city of Poquoson, we've never seen this much of a significant decline in values. The new value of a penny is now at $149,000. With the decrease in assessment, the city manager has recommended an equalized tax rate of 92 cents. The change in the real estate values equates to a $1.6 million decrease in revenue in the current tax revenue. At the equalized rate of 92 cents, the city will be receiving approximately $139,000 less in real estate revenue than in the fiscal year 11 budget. The effect of the equalized rate on the average residential home is a decrease in the tax levy of $25.12. Real estate taxes make up approximately 57% of the total general fund revenue budget for the city. This, along with personal property tax, are included in other general property taxes. The FY12 other revenue sources include other local taxes, which include your sales tax and your meals tax, other local revenues, your permits and all, state and federal revenue, transfers, and the use of fund balance. The budget is slightly over $23 million for fiscal year 12, a reduction of almost $300,000 from 11. The general fund expenditures decreased from the $23.3 million to a proposed $23.1 million, a decrease, like I said, of over almost $300,000. Of the total proposed general fund expenditures, the discretionary spending, excluding school transfers, amounts to just a little over $10 million, or less than 50% of the budget. The general fund categories of spending include the legislative and general administrative, public safety, public works, health and welfare, education, parks, recreation, and culture, transfers out, and other non-departmental expenditures. Public safety, education, and transfers for debt service make up approximately 72% of the general fund budget. Debt service expenditures are expected to be $2 million, approximately $2 million. The debt service for the city is $608,000, and debt service for the school is $1.4 million. The city's current debt service And the debt service fund is expected to increase by over $300,000, $371,000 in fiscal year 13, and another $331,000 in fiscal year 14, and then level off for the next 8 years and then to begin to decrease slightly for 5 years with final maturity on existing debt in 2030. The Capital Projects Fund includes $455,000 from VDOT for highways and streets. Funds are used at the city's discretion. This budget proposes using $148,000 for street paving and $307,000 for drainage projects, or approximately those amounts. The remaining budget in the Capital Projects Fund is a transfer from the general fund to support the new mandates by the EPA for TMDL, total maximum daily limits for phosphorus, nitrogen, and sediment and stormwater runoff, which is a mandate by the EPA. The Solid Waste Fund's total budget for 12 is $890,000, of which $48,000 is the use of net assets. The use of net assets are for non-cash expenditures, that is depreciation that's included in this enterprise fund. There is a proposed fee increase for fiscal year 12. The cost of the solid waste fund has been increasing over time, and there's also been an increase in tons collected, which also drives up the cost of the program. The Utilities Fund provides for maintenance of sewer lines and pump stations. The fiscal year 12 expenses are projected to be just over $3 million, and this is a decrease of $269,000. The decrease in expenditures is due mostly to the one phase of the SSES plan being completed in 2012. The fee is proposed to remain level at $50 bi-monthly for fiscal year 12. Businesses will continue to pay the $50 bi-monthly fee plus a commercial consumption fee. This is the same rate that it's been for the past 6 years. As mentioned before, the first phase of the SSES plan, which is a court-ordered mandate, will be completed in fiscal year 12. As the city continues with this court-ordered consent for utilities, there will be future substantial costs that the city will incur. The Utilities Department also has an increase in its debt service. The debt service for the utility fund will increase over $250,000 in fiscal year 13, and the pump station 2 debt will be due in fiscal year 15. The need to evaluate the fee structure will be necessary as the city begins the 13 budget. The Parks and Recreation Fund budget for fiscal year 12 is approximately $433,000, which is about $18,000 more than the fiscal year 11 budget. This fund accounts for the parks and recreational activities which are financed by user fees, the pool, and special events. This year's budget includes a $79,200 transfer from the general fund to help supplement the user fees for various activities. This is a decrease of approximately $1,600 from fiscal year 11. There is also a slight proposed fee increase for 2 programs offered by Parks and Recreation, the fall soccer and the field hockey camp. The fiscal year 12 proposed budget for Fleet Management Fund is a little over $632,000, or a decrease of $34,000. This is an internal service fund whereby fees are charged to the city departments and the school based on its usage. The budget document is available for viewing at the Poquoson Public Library, the city manager's office, and it's posted on the city's website. Tonight's the first reading, and the budget is currently scheduled to be adopted on May 9th.
Thank you, Teresa. Any questions from council while she's still reading? Okay, I think this is probably the most delivered budget. I think I've seen it on TV 20 times and heard it here about 20 times. So, you've certainly got the information out there as far as what the city's doing. So with that, let me make a statement here right before we open the public hearing. I've said since basically the one thing that's complicating this issue this year is the reassessment. And the reassessment is probably the majority of the questions that I get out in public, and I'm sure that the majority of council gets out in public. And I guess that's the reason that I keep saying, and this will be the third time that I've said it here at the podium, is that council has no control over the value of real estate. That's set by state law to be assessed basically at 100% of its value, as best an appraiser can do. We're aware that overall that the real estate rates values fell 12.5% overall. We're also keenly aware as a council that that's not necessarily equal, that some people's fell more, some people's fell less, and there are a very few people's who didn't fall at all. Yet for the city, the only thing that we can control is the rate. And what I would tell you is that the rate is set in a way that the city will actually collect less tax dollars in general property taxes than we collected last year. In other words, it is a declining budget. It's already set at it's about $140,000 or so less than we collected last year. We're going to operate the city for that amount and less. And as I add some color commentary before the public hearing, you just have to pardon me, but these are the other things that the city has, and I'll be quite open and honest with everybody here. The school board did a tremendous job with their budget. The city did a tremendous job with their budget. But here are some of the reductions that these budgets have had to overcome. And I'll categorize them in three perspectives. State revenue reductions. This would be decreases to the city of Poquoson, either through the school system or through direct funding from the state that we've overcome in the last several years. That total in schools is $300,000 this year. From public safety, from constitutional officers to police departments, that's $126,000 decrease. So the state revenues over the last couple years to the city of Poquoson have fallen $426,000. Economics, where there's no question in anybody's mind that economically the country has not done as well on a whole, and we've seen it in our interest rates and everything else. I'll tell you that we're dealing with a $291,000 reduction in personal property tax over the last several years. We're dealing with business licenses that have decreased by $49,000 due to lack of business. And here's a surprising one, interest rates, just like we deal with at home, $145,000 less in interest that we draw on the unappropriated fund balance. And then finally, increased costs. There's no question that the cost of health care and that the cost of social services for the city of Poquoson have both increased to the tune of about $168,000 plus. So with all of those negative cost drivers to the city, we are still delivering a budget $130,000 less than what we collected last year in real estate taxes. Okay, so to try and give you some perspective on what we're dealing with. All right, any questions on what I just said? Because I don't want to be the only one talking up here for council, but I'm ready to open the public hearing.
Just to comment, we did a tremendous reduction last year and the year before we even got to this one.
And those figures counted the last couple of years. Okay. All right, so with that said, I'd like to open the public hearing. First will be the public hearing. Those that want to speak in favor of or in opposition to the budget in general. Anybody? Yes, sir. If you could, just state your name and your address so we have a record. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council, Mr. Wheeler. I'm Dr. David Trump. I'm the director of the Peninsula Health District with our public health offices at 416 J. Clyde Morris Boulevard in Newport News and 1126 Professional Drive in Williamsburg. The Peninsula Health District, which is part of the Virginia Department of Health, is the local health department for the city of Poquoson and for York County, James City County, Williamsburg, and Newport News. Our basic operations are funded cooperatively by the state and the supported local governments. And we additionally manage approximately $2 million in federal grant funds. Poquoson's portion of our total cooperative budget for fiscal year 2012 is $120,411, or 1.7% of the total. After revenue, that net by formula is shared 67.5% from the state general fund and 32.5% by the city. The residents of Poquoson are 30.6% of the population served by the health district, and city residents and property and business owners receive a range of services from the health district. During fiscal year 2010, services for Poquoson accounted for 1.2% of the district's environmental health program work. We permitted and inspected 32 restaurants and other food establishment businesses in the city and conducted animal bite investigations for rabies prevention. City residents receive 1.7% of the medical services and 0.4% of the dental services provided by the district. Those services included visits primarily by low-income and uninsured patients to clinics for sexually transmitted disease prevention, family planning, and for adult dental care. 218 Poquoson residents receive basic immunizations from the health district. This past year, the state provided us with several thousand doses of seasonal influenza vaccine that we were able to offer at no cost at multiple clinics and at health van sites throughout the district. The best attended evening clinic was at the Poquoson Elementary School, where we administered flu vaccine to 498 children and adults. With federal funds, we also operate WIC, Women, Infants, and Children, program of supplemental nutrition and nutrition education, which each month serves an average of 22 pregnant and breastfeeding women and 48 young children living in low-income households in the city. Our health district professionals daily work with patients, physicians, school leadership, long-term care facility managers, and others to identify and control the spread of communicable diseases such as whooping cough, norovirus, and tuberculosis. We have a close working relationship with your local emergency management team in order to prepare for and respond to public health aspects of natural and man-made disasters. Thank you for allowing me a little time this evening to highlight some of the activities of the Peninsula Health District, which is your local health department.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Any others? Okay, then I'll close the public hearing and immediately open the public hearing on the fee and rate structure. Anybody that wants to discuss that or make a statement on that? Yes, ma'am. And again, just please state your name and address.
My name is Libby Griebel. I live at 46 Shoreline Drive. And I'm here tonight, and I'm surprised that this council chambers is not packed to see 11 cents increase in the tax levy. I appreciate what you're going through. I know it's a difficult task, but I am calling on the council to go back and review this budget and see where additional monies can be shaved. I think a 13.6% increase in the tax levy is too much. I understand the PowerPoint that Mr. Wheeler put out, our city manager. But what I think this council is failing to understand that what the city is facing, every citizen in this city is facing. We're facing people with lost jobs, decreases in salaries, gas going up, utilities going up, just like the city. And you're asking the citizens of Poquoson to shoulder that entire burden. And I think it's too much. And I'm just asking the council if they will take another hard look to shoulder a little more of this burden. I don't think anyone objects to a tax increase. I think we all recognize that that is inevitable. But to try and compensate for the lost revenue from lowered tax assessments, I think is wrong. And we may continue to see lower tax assessments. And I don't know how many of you keep up with sales in the city of Poquoson, what the assessments are doing, but there was a time in Poquoson when a house went on the market and it was sold within 30 days. When we were in the '06 hike, they were selling in 30 minutes. That is not the case anymore. And I've talked to a lot of realtors. I am in the real estate industry. I talked to a lot of realtors, and they're saying people don't want to come to Poquoson anymore. They don't want to come because of the flooding, and they're afraid of it. And so you're seeing some decrease as a result of that, because people can go right next door to Carriage Chapel Road, where there are beautiful homes built in Carriage Chapel Road. Poquoson no longer has that drawing card that it once had, that most of us who have lived here for any length of time have experienced. But if you talk to people today, that drawing card no longer exists. And I think it's unfair to shoulder this entire tax burden on the citizens. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Any others? Okay, I'll close the public hearing. No actions to be taken on this item tonight, as it is the first reading, and we'll take action on this at the next scheduled council meeting. Okay, moving on to new business. I want to talk about an ordinance implementing credit card convenience fees.
Teresa, I think, will introduce the issue for us, Mr. Mayor. We discussed it earlier in work session, so I'll just do a quick summary.
The city began taking face-to-face credit cards back in 2003, and at that particular time, we weren't allowed to charge a convenience fee for the use of those face-to-face transactions. And on or about 2007, January 2008, the credit card companies began allowing face-to-face convenience charges to be charged. The city paid approximately $28,000 last year for the convenience of face-to-face of using the credit cards. For the first 9 months of this year, we've paid approximately $17,000. In order to offset some of these costs, because we did budget for them yearly since inception, since 2003, the fiscal year 12 budget includes an administrative fee income. We can't charge any more than the credit card companies are charging us. Steve, the treasurer, Steve Clark, expects this charge to be about 2.5%. If a citizen pays $100 for their taxes or for their utilities, they'll end up paying approximately $102.50 for the use of the face-to-face credit card transactions, or the use of a debit card. And then there's this ordinance allows the city, allows the treasurer to charge that fee for the convenience of a face-to-face charge.
Okay. So, at the end of the day, what you're basically addressing here is that we're looking to reimburse the city for the charge of the credit card above the amount that we collect in tax when it's used. In other words,
Correct.
Not to take a 6% reduction for folks to use their credit card at the commissioner's or at the treasurer's office and have the other taxpayers pay that 6%.
Correct.
Okay. Questions?
I do have one question. Is it easier for us to take credit cards? Does it help in our accounting at all? Or is it just the same to take checks from people? Is there any benefit to the city?
I don't know that there's any benefit. I don't know if Steve can address that or not.
Okay.
So there's no additional cost for us handling cash or checks
No.
than handling credit card?
Are you talking about from a personnel standpoint or an administrative standpoint? No.
Yeah.
The answer is no.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Again, this is a first reading. Is there any questions, comments, or discussion? You want to take a preliminary vote on this, or just move forward?
You should
Mayor,
take a
I'd
vote.
Take a
You should
vote.
Take a vote on it, and it comes back up at the next session for the second reading.
Okay.
Mayor, I move that we adopt an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances by revising Chapter 74 pertaining to administrative fees. And I think Judy has already made a correction in the paragraph right below Chapter 74 taxation. The word changes should be charges.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. A motion made and seconded. Any discussion on this item?
I would just say that, and I'm in favor of the motion, but I would just say that we have to be very, very sure that perhaps with some of the first billings that went out that people traditionally would pay with a credit card, that it'd be very clearly stated so that no one gets a surprise, even though it's a small amount of money. We don't want people to suddenly find that they've got to charge in addition to what they knew that they would have.
To speak to that, I just want to say, and Stephen's worked with us, we want to make sure that if the council does this is on a timeline so that it's past the June collection for taxes. We wanted to give people as much warning as possible to adjust to it, and certainly not make it part of the June collection of taxes.
Okay, so this would be, is that kind of clearly stated in the?
With just the timing that it goes, because you'll come back on second reading, and then it'll be 30 days beyond that, so you will be past the collection date for June.
Okay. Other comments, questions?
We can also put a letter, can't we, in the billing statement? If persons pay by credit card, that they will find themselves incurring a fee.
Right, I think we can note it all over the place, because that's a voluntary choice that people have. They're not required to pay face-to-face with a credit card. It's just an option that they choose.
Yeah.
And if they do use it, and the city pays the fee from the credit card owner, the company, then that means that the rest of the taxpayers are paying part of their taxes. Now, one question, do you know if, let's say somebody uses this for their property taxes, would this fee be deductible just like the tax?
I have absolutely no idea. I would say the answer is no.
I wouldn't.
Because it's not the tax.
Yeah, right.
But you get miles, though.
Miles. Yeah.
Okay. So we want to discourage people from using credit cards then is what the result result of this will be.
I think, if I could, Mr. Go ahead. I think the issue is when someone uses a face-to-face credit card for $100, because they have a $100 bill, the city receives something less than $100, $97.50, let's say. We still needed the $100. That's what the purpose of the bill was. So should the person that chooses to pay that way pay the cost of his or her decision, or should the general taxpayers pay the cost of their decision? And I think, like most things, when we started this years ago, it was a really small number of people doing it, but this is closing in on $30,000, which for us is a lot of money. And so we just noted as something that we hope that you'll consider.
And we do this at the gas station anyway. We're accustomed to it. As most of them say, 3 cents off if you pay cash, that kind of stuff. So,
same principle.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Judy, please.
Councilman Krieger.
Aye.
Councilwoman Crawford.
Aye.
Councilman Green.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Freeman.
Aye.
Councilman Southall.
Aye.
Councilman Bernal.
Aye.
And Mayor Hunt.
Aye.
Mr. Mayor, the motion carried by a vote of 7-0.
Okay, and we'll see that again at the next meeting. Next item under new business is a reimbursement resolution for City Capital Project, Phase 1 of the Public Works Compound.
Mr. Mayor, I think I'll introduce this one if I could.
Yes, sir.
As council is aware, recently council gave direction to move forward with this project. This resolution prepared by our bond counsel is simply to allow us to reimburse ourselves from the proceeds of that borrowing for any work that we do up front, so we don't need to unnecessarily hold the project down. It also covers us should we change financing, refinancing all the way through, we're covered by through this action, being able to link all of our expenses for this project to the borrowing, however it may change over time.
Okay.
What I would consider an important housekeeping. All right.
Okay. With that explanation, do we have a motion to carry this item forward?
Mr. Mayor, make a motion that we adopt the resolution of the City Council of the City of Poquoson, Virginia, declaring its intention to reimburse itself from the proceeds of one or more tax-exempt financings for certain expenditures made and or to be made in connection with the acquisition of certain capital projects for the city.
Second.
Okay. Questions, comments, or concerns? Okay, if not, Judy, please.
Councilman Southall.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Freeman.
Aye.
Councilman Bernal.
Aye.
Councilman Green.
Aye.
Councilman Krieger.
Aye.
Councilwoman Crawford.
Aye.
Mayor Hunt.
Aye.
Mr. Mayor, the motion carried by a vote of 7-0.
Okay, and now the next item is comments of the city manager.
I only have one item this evening, Mr. Mayor. Council members will recall from your package, we gave you a note about our upcoming two school board appointments. We have the persons that are currently in those seats are eligible for reappointment, and both have expressed a desire to continue to serve. We've also continued to actively solicit board back applications. To this point, we have not received any additional applications. We have further contacted people that we sort of had older applications to see if they were interested in continuing those in active status, and not heard back in the affirmative for many of those. So I, put that on your calendar so that if you know of persons that may be interested, the board bank application process is something they should look into for these two appointments. Also, I know council members at time have talked about the importance they perceive of getting back to an interview process with applicants. And so if the council does want to decide to have interviews, you do not need to have that decision tonight. You can wait until after the night of that first public hearing, which is May the 9th, which you see the number of candidates you have. Whether or not you have candidates beyond the two incumbents may or may not influence your decision, but just to put affirmatively to you that if you're going to interview them, you need to do it probably between the 9th and that next council meeting, because at the second council meeting in May, you'll need to make the appointment. So put that on your calendar prospectively, and if now or in the future you have direction on interviewing, please let us know what you'd like to do.
Okay.
I have nothing else, except, no, I'm good.
Bud? Yes, I would like to encourage all of the citizens of Poquoson to consider serving their city by applying to the various board banks for opportunity to work on the various committees and boards for the city. It's good to have a good selection of people to pick from. I would also like to thank the people who participated and the the name of the club for the trees we planted at the library.
The garden club.
The garden club, okay, for their activities in planting the trees there at the library. It made it a really nice project. And I'd like to thank Ms. Libby Gribble for standing up and making her comments for the citizens of Poquoson from her point of view. And that'll take it from me.
Am I next? I wanted to mention that in our packet we got a city-created checklist for homes that are being elevated, and it was created at the request of a citizen, and after I've gone through it, it's a very good list and of recommended practices. So I highly encourage anybody who is facing elevating their home to look at what the checklist is that the city's provided for them. It's very good. Also, I was out of town, but did we have the Easter egg hunt this past Saturday? And everything went well. I just think we ought to give credit for Tom Hartman and Atlantic Plumbing, Heating and Air Conditioning for making this possible for the past 15 years or so. To talk about the butterfly garden again, it was made possible, I have a list, by Luke Wolf, the scout who is working on his Eagle Badge, the Kiwanis Club, Friends of the Library, and the Garden Club.
Kiwanis Club is one.
Okay, so I'm in Kiwanis. You come join us. But it was a lovely day. It was slightly cold, but it's a very nice area, and I encourage citizens to come and have lunch out there on a warmer day. I was going to ask Randy if we have an update for citizens regarding the Wrens Road public boat ramp.
I'll be pleased. Thanks to lots of people's efforts, Dave Callis on our staff more than anyone, but also assisted by Tom and assisted by Ellen, we have gotten some traction with the state on a grant to move forward there, and we are as in the queue as is possible to get approval. Their funding stream is a bit impaired for 2012, but what we've been told to expect is the money will be available in 2013. So we've got a little bit longer lead time than normal, but we're having much more success than we probably could have anticipated. And I think that has to do with our sort of, when I say our, I really mean Dave, continually beating the drum with these folks. Every 2 weeks, where are we? What can we do to help? What can we give you more? And either they got tired of listening to him, or more likely, he just did a really excellent job.
Dave gets the royal we from Poquoson. Good job. That's all. Thank you, sir.
Nothing in addition.
Okay. Dr. Bernal.
I'd just like to repeat what I said the other evening with the probably a little larger audience watching this evening, and that is, first of all, to thank council for placing your trust in me to join you as a member of council, and I do appreciate that very much. And secondly, to say to the citizens of Poquoson that I recognize I've been appointed, not elected, but I will work just as hard as if I had been by a landslide election and try to represent the city and the interest of the residents to the best of my ability, and I do appreciate the opportunity. The other thing I just wanted to mention very briefly is to thank the city manager for spending a very thorough and patient time with me going over not only the budget but a lot of the issues that are coming before council, and I do appreciate that, Randy. And
it's my pleasure,
I know
sir.
I have a steep learning curve, but that certainly went a long way towards getting me off to a good start.
It's my pleasure, and thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Bernal.
I'd like to welcome Ray. I think it's going to be a fine addition to the city council. I had the pleasure of attending with Randy in your stead the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission meeting and the Transportation Planning Organization meeting, and I don't know what I could tell you that was really, maybe I better rephrase that. We got a report for the 6-year plan, wasn't it, Randy? For the Transportation Organization. Started off sounding really great, $4.6 billion for 6 years, and then by the time they got through taking off everything that comes off the top, we really didn't have a whole lot for transportation. But at least Tidewater is going to get a good share of what was left.
And I thank you for attending that in my stead. Frank?
I think 3 things, Mr. Mayor. One is congratulations to Everett Jordan. He's our city representative to Thomas Nelson Community College, and he's in charge of the apprentice school at the shipyard. And he was selected as being the keynote speaker at Thomas Nelson's graduation ceremony coming up in May, which is kudos for him. As we heard tonight, there's concern over the raise of our tax rate to 11 cents. I had a phone call the other day from someone who got their assessment, and the citizen was talking to their neighbor, and he says, "Oh, this is going to mean $500 more in our taxes." I called the commissioner here, Revenue, and he figured it out, and it was a tax increase of like $6.34. So I encourage anybody who has concern over what the potential is for tax increase to call either the finance office or Graham Wilson and get the actual figures as to what it's going to cost them. And I'm sure they are open for phone calls and whatever else.
You want to go ahead and give him Graham Wilson's phone number while you're around?
You can call Graham Wilson at 868-3018, or you can call Teresa Owens at 868-3031, and they'd be more than happy to help you. Or Graham's on the first floor, Teresa's on the second floor. You can stop in and see them, and they're more than willing to help you. And the last thing is,
yes, sir.
Thanks to both the city manager and the school superintendent for getting on the telephone and calling the county administrator of Gloucester and also the school superintendent of Gloucester and offering assistance in any way possible. They didn't wait hours or days or whatever. They were on the phone, immediately calling the county and offering our assistance. So
I'm well aware, and thank you for recognizing that.
It was
Appreciate
great.
that.
I mean, so thank you.
Okay. The only thing that I've got tonight is remind the citizens that there is a process, and again, talking from the aspect of your real estate assessment, that there is a process that's open to you. It starts, if you disagree with your assessment, it starts with the assessor himself. His phone number?
I don't have it offhand.
I don't have it offhand.
I will. Hold on, give me a second.
But a lot of things can be resolved face-to-face with the city assessor right there, and if not, then the Board of Equalization will be stood up shortly to address those issues where there's true disagreement on the assessment, and that'll be the process to challenge your assessment, as, again, the council can't address that. You got his number?
Mr. Fazen's number is 868-3080. And now for citizens that are concerned that the value is too high or too low.
Too high or too low?
Last week, the majority of phone calls that they had received were people that were concerned that the values that had been put in the new reassessment were too low.
Okay.
I normally don't have any comment, but I'd point it to you that the elementary school Odyssey of the Mind team and the middle school Odyssey of the Mind team won their state competition, and they're going to the world competition at the University of Maryland toward the end of May. And I think that's
excellent. Great. Thank you for bringing that up, Wayne. That had just gone by.
I have a grandson on one of those teams. So I'm
No, we never would have known.
I kind of figured, and like a proud grandfather should do, he recognized it, and I get that.
Mr. Mayor, one further comment along the same lines. I had a conversation with someone today who indicated to me that the Poquoson High School band did basically a clean sweep down in Myrtle Beach. And I don't know the details of that, but I hear that they won numerous awards and they represented the city extremely well.
And let me thank the council as we leave here for making the transition here to this seat as mayor easier and more positive than even I felt like it might be, as well as Buddy mentioned, backing me up on these boards and commissions. I'm truly enjoying attending all of those functions with you, as well as when you run into one where I'm at another function, having somebody represent the city. I feel like it's important that we're going to be out there in the community and that they're going to know Poquoson is there. They may not like what we have to say, but we're going to be there. Okay? So appreciate that, and appreciate that from council.
Need for a short closed session.
Yes, sir. Before we leave, I guess we're going to take a motion for a closed session so we can talk about the subject of With Creek Road.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we convene a closed session pursuant to Section 2.23711A3 of the Code of Virginia 1950 as amended to discuss the acquisition of real property for a public purpose and disposition of publicly held real property, i.e. With Creek Road.
Second.
Steve, please.
Councilwoman Crawford.
Aye.
Councilman Krieger.
Aye.
Councilman Southall.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Freeman.
Aye.
Councilman Bernal.
Aye.
Councilman Green.
Aye.
And Mayor Hunt.
Aye.
Mr. Mayor, the motion carried by a vote of 7-0.
We're going to be in closed session.
Is that the